G'day guys, Ben and Adam here bringing you our 5th podcast. Is it number 5?
Number 5.
Woo! Here we go. So today we're going to be talking about how to buy a property in 90 days. You may have seen in our 3rd episode that we went into a fair bit of detail and kind of went around in circles a little bit at times. So today we thought we'd break it down into a more actionable packet so that you can kind of follow through and give you a bit of a time frame, how these things really work in the real world. They can drag out quite far, but we're just going to run through how that can actually happen in a 90-day period.
This is really for those of you out there who are in a position financially where you can seriously consider buying a property. So let's just pretend that you've got enough cash in the bank, or you've got enough equity, or you've got a guarantor, and you know that you can actually borrow money and you're in a position where you're seriously considering it. Because, you know, I know there'll be other people listening to this that are just getting started, and that's cool too. This will be the perfect sort of launch into when you are ready what to do. But this is really for those people that are ready to kickstart stuff and are sick of sitting on the sidelines, or, you know, whatever reason people have been doing their thing and are really ready to action something.
Yeah, like I guess an important part, and why I think it's really important that you do put yourself in a position when you are ready to start this journey, is with the finance side of things, it's not just about how much can I borrow, can I make this happen. It's defining, like, it's part of your research for the next steps to follow. So it helps you define exactly what your purchase limit can be. There's no point thinking, I would love to spend $600,000. I talked to a broker or my bank manager 3 years ago and they said that's what I can do. let's come up with a plan here based on that amount, when the truth is you might no longer be able to borrow that amount, so your goals could be off. You might be able to borrow a lot more, and you might realize that perhaps your strategy needs to change to reflect that. So it is quite an important part to get that finance sorted, and it's always great to dream about these things and to kind of think about what those next steps are and where we're going to go and kind of dream big, but you just don't want to get too far down that dreaming big path. Set your expectations at a certain point and then have to try and backpedal and reset it, because to be honest, it's just going to make you have a more frustrated experience and a less enjoyable one, and it can be quite stressful at times as well. So we want to try and keep everything moving as smoothly as possible. Yeah,
like I remember when I was buying my first property, I was buying it with a couple of friends, and our borrowing capacity was like $1 million, because the banks were like, yeah, here come 3 little young suckers that, you know, all are working, don't know what buying together is going to mean for them in the future. So, you know, we'll give them $1 million. And I was like, whoa, you know, 24 years of age, $1 million of capacity. We decided the opposite of that, to go buy a cheaper property. You know, $360,000 was the first one that we bought. I then went and bought my second one where I could borrow $500K and spent $200. So just because you've got the capacity doesn't mean you should always spend it. But also coming in real hot and going, 3 years ago I could borrow $600K, and then realizing today you can only borrow $450 can really misset your expectations as well. And I've done that too. Like for 2 or 3 years in the last 5, I couldn't borrow $1 because I was at my servicing limit, and that was super frustrating as well, not just for me, but for my mortgage broker, who I pestered every month for 3 years to try and make something happen.
And hence, I guess you touched on that other point as well. It's like, yeah, we're saying get your finance sorted first, but it does tie back around as being part of your team of advisors, setting up that relationship with your bank manager or your broker. And obviously that comes in handy in those periods where things aren't going so well and you want to pester someone for 3 or 5 years. They're going to stay on side because you've built that good relationship from the start.
Yeah, or they're just trying to get you away from them, like my bank was probably trying to do for me. But you know, the process of finance doesn't have to be overwhelming. It doesn't have to take a long time. If you are one of those people that does have cash or equity or a guarantor, it really, with the right bank manager or broker, shouldn't take more than about 14 to 21 days max to find out roughly what you can borrow and then go from there and get a pre-approval. Now, the reason we both believe that's important is because, as Ad said before, it's really setting budget or framing the conversation you're going to have. Because as we all know, just because you want to go and buy a $2 million property in Bondi Beach doesn't necessarily mean you can afford it. And if you start setting your expectations too high and then you've got to peel it right back, it can also be heartbreaking and stop people doing anything.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I just want to touch back on, we did say 15 days there. That is possible, even with banks the way they are at the moment. Obviously, you might be watching this at some point in the future, but our banks are taking quite a long time to go through their process at the moment. But we've seen it is possible to get it all through in that 15 days. Just, I guess, a couple of tips to help that move through quickly. You don't need to annoy your broker about anything. It's not going to help change the situation or push them. But if they ask you for anything, get it back to them immediately or as soon as you possibly can, because if it takes you a day to respond to get them something, they might not be able to look at that for another, say, 12 to 24 hours. You've instantly lost 2 days, all because you haven't got them a piece of paperwork. And those sort of things, as someone who used to work in finance, that back and forth is what really draws out the process of achieving that pre-approval or getting that finance in place.
Such a simple thing. Just get used to hitting the tennis ball out of your court and back into someone else's. So as soon as I get inquiry from my broker or bank manager, I get them what they need that day, and then the ball's back out of my court and in theirs. And then if I haven't heard from them for a few days, I'll follow them up. So that sort of takes us into the second thing there, dude. Yeah,
exactly. So the next step is jumping into really just the research side of things and identifying what sort of property you want to buy, and even before then, I guess, where you want to buy that property. Now, if we're working off that 90-day time frame, we've said that 30 days is how long you've got to research this part of the journey. So if you have to go through and try and determine where, the what, the who, the how, like 30 days is a long time to be able to do those things, and it doesn't mean you have to do it every day, but we're quite confident that it is something that can be achieved in that time period. So do you want to kick us off on a little bit of, I guess, what we're looking for in the property, or sorry, where we would like to, like where we would be looking for or identifying that?
For sure. Like when we were originally playing around with recording this podcast, we were sort of saying 14 days would probably be max, but then Ads was like, and he made a really valid point, we want to spend more time as investors researching and getting strategy right before we rush into the market and realestate.com and start looking at stuff that makes no sense to our long-term goal. So in terms of the where, we're really talking about market. So Australia's a big place, the world's a big place. We really want to narrow it down to one specific type of property. So the where for me is really Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. But if we look at Heron Todd White's report, which I think is a great place for you to be starting, if you look at their report right now, Sydney's in a stage of decline, as is Melbourne, where Brisbane's at the start of the recovery / rising market phase, which is really where you want to be buying. So long term, it's always those three markets, but short term, we believe Brisbane, Southeast Queensland represents value in the next 7 years.
Awesome. So we've got the market identified, or in your liking at the moment is Brisbane. Once we identify that overall market, I guess we go down to the next level down, which is suburbs. How would you identify the right suburbs that you'd be looking for?
It's a good point, because if we think about Melbourne, Sydney, Brizzy, we're really talking about a subset of areas within the city. You know, it's not just as simple as going, I want to buy Sydney, any suburb will do. There's, you know, Northern Sydney, which is very premium, Southern Sydney beaches, which is premium, Eastern Sydney beaches, which is very premium. Then you've got Western Sydney, which is more affordable, and everything in between. And it's the same with Melbourne. You've got West Melbourne, North Melbourne, which are historically very affordable. And then Central Melbourne, as well as, you know, the Mornington Peninsula, which is now very, very premium. So Brisbane's no different at all. The south and the western sides are the very affordable options, where the northern, eastern and city side's more of the premium, you know, higher quality investment grade stuff long term. So, you know, it's first about identifying the region and then breaking that down to, okay, I'm going North Melbourne, North Sydney, North Brisbane, whatever. How do I find the best suburb for me within that? Yeah.
So how does that tie back round to, say, our purchase limit from finance? Does that help define what pocket or what suburb we're looking for?
100%, man. You know, I've got a $450,000 budget. I'm just going to tick Melbourne and Sydney straight off the box. You know, or I've got $1 million budget. It gives me options in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. Then I've got to identify which is the right area. So I let my budget define which suburbs I'm targeting, and then I identify the best suburbs within that budget based on some criteria. And we talked about this criteria a lot more in the third podcast. And then, you know, from there I handpick 1 or 2 of those suburbs that I'm really going to focus on. Because the biggest mistake most investors make when they're buying in a shorter period of time, or if they don't have the experience in the market, is just rushing out there and buying the wrong property, the wrong suburb at the wrong time.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. So once we've identified a couple of suburbs, is that it? Or do we go deeper again? Is there areas of suburbs you like and don't like? Or is that going too nitty and gritty?
I think, you know, obviously you and I go very, very nitty gritty.
Of course.
The deeper the data for me, the more I enjoy it.
Yeah, that question was a little bit loaded, guys.
We like data here, obviously, and that's why we buy properties that outperform market averages. Everything that I've ever bought has outperformed the Sydney or the Brisbane average for a client and personally. So, you know, outside of the one mistake I made in northern New South Wales, which we'll talk about in another episode, you know, once you've identified the right area of the city, the right suburb, then certain pockets of suburbs, and this is a no-brainer, perform better than others.
Yep.
So you don't want to buy the main road, you don't want to buy across from the cemetery, you don't want to buy directly on the train station, but it's even more than that. There's clusters of premium areas, middle areas and cheap areas within suburbs, and it's the investor's job to figure out where the highest quality areas they can afford and buy the quality, because we know Sydney, for an example, 10 years ago the crappy property in the great suburb was 400k and the good property in the good suburb was 500. Now the good property is worth 1.3 and the crappy property is worth 900k. So what was 100 grand difference is now 400k, and the same will be true for Melbourne and Brisbane in the future. Yeah.
Which is massive. So obviously it's important on all levels of the where and identifying that, and hence why we've switched it over to say this really needs 30 days, and that's because a lot of this, I guess, the research and a lot of the action happens at this part of the stage. It's not, let's go out, look at a property, go, oh yeah, I really like this one, but let's research a little bit about the area and surrounding the property. You never really, I guess, clearly identify what you're looking for and a lot of those criteria, because you're doing it on a property by property basis, which can obviously skew your ideas or your thoughts at the time instead of, I guess, creating a consistent process.
For sure. Like, we'll give you 2 examples of that. Like, you just recently finished building a home. How much time did you spend identifying where you were going to buy versus pulling the trigger on that piece of land that you bought? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I reckon I probably would have spent about 2 hours deciding to purchase the block of land.
Yeah.
And then researching it would have been 2 years. It wasn't 2 years, but much
it was 3 years. You know, it's so true. Like, I think about the last properties I've bought. There's some suburbs that we've been buying in for clients for 4 years. I've been following suburbs for 4 years, and then all of a sudden the right property comes up and you know, boom, I'm on it. So the last maybe 5 properties I bought, I have not even physically inspected them before placing offers, because I knew the suburb and the market that well that by the time I was ready to look, I knew exactly what I wanted to buy, and therefore 99.9% of everything else didn't make any sense.
Yeah, exactly. And that makes a lot of sense. And I guess we've kind of jumped out of the where a little bit and touched on the what you're looking for and how you ran through that you really want to stay away from those main roads. I guess it's still more where, but if you're thinking the specific property, what kind of helps you make that decision? So you said that you could do it without even seeing the property. What would you look at? Like, what are those things that you'll do from a desktop?
It's a really good question, because it's intuitive to me now after buying 300 million bucks worth of property. But to people listening to this isn't just everyday stuff. And so I would be looking at a 500 square metre block.
Yeah.
I would be looking at a premium position in the suburb. I would be looking for a quiet street with lots of owner-occupiers living on it, which you can check all this stuff out online and in Google. I'd be looking for a property with good bedroom sizes, 3 metres by 3 metres minimum, with a master bedroom larger, with a nice big open floor plan and a nice big backyard for the family that I'm going to sell it to in the future. You know, and away from all those things that if I was living on the street for the next 30 years with my family and my kids raising them there, would I want this particular thing? Like, would I want bushfire overlay or flood overlay, you know, or flooding issues? Would I want housing commission next door? Shit no. So why would you buy an investment property with those characteristics?
Yeah, so I guess it's just some of those things, obviously you'll be asking, well, how do I figure these things out? They are a little bit trickier than what you would really want them to be to find, but they all are out there on the internet, and you can find this information if you spend enough time looking through it. Hence why we allocated so much time to this research stage and a little bit less for the next of what's coming up, which is really, okay, we know where we want to buy, we know what we want to buy. I guess at this stage, still in the research stage, at 30 days, we'd also want to identify who's going to be able to help us do that and how we are going to do that. So it doesn't have to be overly complicated, but let's jump to who, which is obviously going to be your top performing real estate agents in the area.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they're going to be your main point of call and be able to help you through that process. Obviously there's buyer's agents like ourselves that might be able to assist also. Then once you've got a bit of an idea on who's going to be helping you, we can jump into the how. Now, the how can be a lot simpler than what you really want to make it to be. It's keep looking on realestate.com every single day until you find that property which ticks all of your earlier goals or requirements that you've set out in that research stage.
It's really that simple, man. Like, set up the alerts on realestate.com once you know exactly what you want. You know, when I do that, I just go houses, I do the suburb name, I do the houses, I do 3+ bedrooms, I do a starting budget or price point above, you know, the median, because I'm looking for quality. I'd look for a 500+ square meter piece of land, 1 bedroom, you know, 0 to 2 car spaces, and that's my general search. And I just get alerts.
1 bathroom, guys, not 1 bedroom.
Oh, that's
that'd be some interesting buying.
1 bedroom granny. That might affect your long-term capital growth, guys. But you know what I'm saying. Like, just filter it simply. Get the alerts in your email. And just get diligent that you need, you know, you and I know that one day is the difference between us buying it and someone missing out, or you buying it and someone else missing out.
Yeah, 100% agree. And it's really why we're saying focus on the research stage, get that right. Then when you're going to the actual purchasing of the property, it should happen very quickly once you find the right one. So we've talked a bit about the time frames of 15 days for finance, 30 days for identifying and doing your research. Then the next step is 15 days to find that right property. Now, that's half the amount of time that we said we need for researching. Like, why is that? Like, I obviously know why, but do you want to explain that to everyone a little bit?
Do you do everything in your life that quick, bro, or just 15 days? 15 days is because you know so much about the market and the property that you're going to buy. Yeah, we're not cutting that out, guys. Sorry about that. Ads is just a big sweaty mess here right now, and I'm standing here barefoot, just loving life. But the reality is, once you know what you're looking for and you're buying in the right suburb, a great property generally comes up at least once a week, maybe once a fortnight. So if you know what you're looking for, and therefore most of the product on the market makes no sense to look at or buy, it makes it really easy to find that right one and move on it as quickly as you can. Yeah,
exactly. And like we've touched on, realestate.com can help a lot with that. You can set up alerts and do it, but personally, there's nothing beats just jumping on it every day. So if you have a daily or weekly routine, try and fit it in there somewhere, whether it's when you're first waking up or just before go to bed, just do a little look through, and that's enough to kind of keep it fresh in your brain rather than relying on realestate.com to notify you when that perfect property shows up.
You've talked about being quick, and you've talked about getting on it every day, either in the morning or at night. What are you referring to here? Are you still talking property, man? What's going on?
I'm out. See you guys.
Beck, what's happening? No, but in all seriousness, you know, it doesn't take that long to find the right property once you know what you're looking for. And an example of this, as I mentioned before, is I can't even remember in the last 5 properties where I've spent more than 1 week actually inspecting properties. It's more, I know what I want, that right property comes up, because I've done the right due diligence and research, I get to effectively move on it. The challenge then is when the right one comes up, you're not the only person in the market that wants to buy it, and that's where your challenge is. And that's why you need to be talking to your agents each week, talking to or following realestate.com daily, and making sure when it comes up, someone else doesn't jump in front of you on that line. But yeah, and that is always another fish in the sea there as well.
Definitely. Like you said, like a quality property jumps up in line with your goal should be, what, once every week or fortnight. So there's always something else coming up. But my advice is jump on it instantly. So if you want to submit an offer, have an idea of what your terms are going to be before you even get to that point where you've found the right property. Know where you sort of see value or what your price range is, so when you've found that right property, submit the offer instantly. You've got no idea how much it helps being the first person into those sort of situations.
100%. Like, it's so important to be first, and first often means that your terms can be worse, your price can be lower as well. It's not first in always pays a premium either. And if you can, you know, target out of area agents, or, you know, a sale that is, you know, for some reason distressed in any way, then being first to market makes a huge difference. Now, an example of this, in December 2016, I was brought an incredible opportunity by my sister, who does a lot of our buying in Brisbane, and she saw this property within literally a minute. I was like, I'm going to buy it sight unseen. Rung the agent, who was completely out of area. It was her first property that she'd ever sold as a favour to a friend. I was able to buy that property for myself 40 grand below what it was worth on the day, just a result of timing of the year and identifying, because I knew the market that well, that this was, you know, not your high quality agent that's always going to get a premium, that it was an out of area green agent that you really can work well. Yeah,
definitely. So that's one example of where it worked quite well, but it's not always, like, the premium agents can still help you out as a lot. Like
100%.
It's not saying that you want to find someone that's out of market. That was just a scenario that worked out well back time. Other times it's the high performing agents will be the ones that actually do bring you the great deals, because as we know and as we've talked about a few times, it's not always about getting the cheapest possible price. It's getting the best possible property for the right price. So that's where a high performing agent can really help you out.
And I just wanted to touch on that, man, because I think that's important for people to understand. Like, let's say that you go quality, which you and I always go for now. So let's say that your approach to investing is quality and long term. Let's say that you go pay 400k for a property today, and over the next 15 years, because of the quality, because of the position in the suburb and the asset you bought, you get an extra 2% than your average property in that same market. 2% over 15 years per year might not sound like a lot, but we're literally talking about $280,000 over 15 years that extra decision will get you.
What amount was that 280,000 based on?
That's based on, sorry, 260,000 is based on a 400k purchase price. Just compounding at an extra 2% per year over that time. Now, if you're spending $1 million and you can figure out a way to get an extra 2% on $1 million, compounded for 15 years, we're now talking about 580 odd thousand bucks.
Massive figures.
These numbers mean so much. When we're talking quality and premium, and as Ads talked about, value, that's the value that you're shopping for, the long-term result, not the short-term, I've saved myself 30,000 bucks, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess we've talked a little bit about all the different steps up to purchasing that property. What do we jump in first? I guess it's into negotiations. Do we want to go into that much detail on negotiations now, or?
We've talked about that again on the third podcast, but negotiations are simple. Start low with price and with terms. Average terms, low price. Get much better terms, great price. Then finally, if you've got the opportunity to, best price, best terms, and give them 24 hours to close it. Now, we've found from buying a lot of property that that's the most effective way in a warm market. In a hot market, that doesn't work, because they're just like, see you later, I've got 6 other offers on the door. And in a cold marketplace, you've got a lot more time to play the game.
So obviously a great question to ask in that situation is, has anyone else put an offer in, or are you expecting any offers to come in soon? Because obviously that helps you identify whether it's a multiple offer situation or if you have a little bit of time to negotiate. But like Ben said, if it is a really hot market, they might tell you that there's no offers, and that could easily change the next day. They could have an open home, there could be 6 offers on afterwards. So it is quite important to be wary of what the market conditions are at that point in time.
Yeah, and that's where your relationship with your agent comes back into play. And hopefully the fact that you've been communicating with them for a period of time and told them what you want, you know, makes sense for them too.
Yeah, 100% agree. So we've placed an offer, we've negotiated a little bit. Now, depending on the conditions of the market, settlement terms could be a little bit longer, but we've said 30 days to go from placing an offer through to settlement. So that basically means that on the terms of your contract, they're 30-day terms. That wraps up our 90 days, but it doesn't necessarily mean everything's over. There's still things to do during that next 30-day period. And do you want to kick us off with that, Ben?
Yeah, you've got obviously a building and pest inspection, which is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Where you want to find out structurally, building and termite wise, if there's any issues. You also want to get your solicitor involved or your conveyancer to do all of those necessary searches on the property.
Yeah.
You want to do further due diligence on the property too. So in every contract I buy, regardless of state, I always want building and pest, due diligence and finance clauses in them.
Yep.
I don't care if that's the norm for the state, that's the best thing to protect me to make the right decision. I also like to get a town planning check personally. I like to get a property manager through the property in that 30-day period just to have a look at things as well.
Yeah. So as far as, just to break that down a little bit for people, we've just got our fully executed signed contract back from the vendor, or the vendor's agent, sorry. And what's our next first step? Do we go straight into our building and pest? Do we go to our finance? Where do you think to go? Or
it's
going to break
point,
down a little bit of step that out?
Yeah, like sorry to skim over that. What we're really talking about there is, first thing is you get your contract back, send it to your solicitor, send it to your mortgage broker, call them both and let them know we've got a deal. In that first week, I do everything that both my solicitor and mortgage broker ask me to do.
Yep.
And then in that first week, I also book building and pest insurance, building and pest inspections, and I also organise insurance.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's probably playing in the back of your mind there. Just insurance.
Insurance. But yeah, insurance is vital. Some people say you don't need it. I never ever want to get caught out in that grey area in terms of whose property does it legally belong to, so I organise it very early. And then what I do, and what you probably do as well, is just touch base with each of those advisors on a weekly basis, follow their instructions the day they ask for things to be done. And as long as there's no red flags, I continue forward with settlement. But if there's any red flags, then I address them as they come up.
So realistically, the most important point that is to always, I guess, like we touched on at the start, knock the ball out of your side of the court, get it, return it, get it to whoever else it needs to be. So it can be a little bit daunting when you purchase the property because there's 5 people, 6 people that you need to get into contact with quite quickly. But just treat it like work. Just smash it out over half an hour, an hour, get all those things out. And then when they get back to you, like Ben said, just get back to them as soon as possible. If you don't know how to answer what they're asking, ask them to explain it more or ask questions. Just that's the same as knocking it back into their court rather than you sitting there going, oh, they've asked if I noticed a JP in my area. What's a JP? Or getting caught up on these ideas, and you might think about it for a couple of days or do your own research or ask a friend first. Don't bother, just ask directly the person who asked you the question for more information, and that's the quickest and easiest way to get a result. Nobody
in your team of advisors that cares for you will ever have a problem with you asking a question if it's going to help you and them save time. So ask questions, learn as much as you possibly can, and just enjoy the journey, knowing that it is going to be a bit stressful, a bit uncomfortable. You will be a bit out of your comfort zone. There will be some paperwork, but at the end of the day, 15, 20 years time, hopefully if you bought the right property, you might double your money. And that's what it's all about, setting yourself and your family up for wherever it is that you want to be in the future. So, you know, I think that's it, man. That's probably a wrap. Yeah, I think that covers everything through to settlement. Obviously, if you're moving into the property yourself, you'll have to go and collect keys, those sort of things at the settlement date. If it's an investment property, you won't need to be there. They'll arrange that with your property manager, who you would have already sorted out in that sort of period as well. But yeah, that's everything. I think we've got our property purchased in 90 days right there. Yeah, so, you know, that might feel a bit quick for some of you. It might not feel quick enough for others. You know, I know that there's some people that already have finance right now, that know the market, know the suburb. You know, some people might already have an advisor in place, like a buyer's agent, to help, or they're looking to engage one that can help speed up the process too. But regardless of where you're at, take your time. It's far better to spend more time doing this rather than rushing anything through and getting the best possible result. And the best result doesn't mean the best result today. The best result is setting yourself, your family up for where you want to be in 15 years time, which is really the only reason we're all buying property, right? Like, to get passive income and capital gains for life. Yeah, 100%. Like, obviously there's ways to make short-term money in property as well if you want to flip or put a lot of work in it or wear a lot of risk through the process, but that's not what we're about. We're about long-term actual investments that
are here to try and give you some security in the future and some financial freedom.
Sweet. So if you've liked this podcast, please leave us a review. We'll continue to put stuff like this up there, which I hope is getting through to you guys, and we're keeping it a bit of fun, and yeah, really enjoying it so far. If you've got any ideas for podcasts that you'd like us to do, just hit us up through the podcast. You can leave a comment, or you can just reach out to us at Pumped On Property as well and check out what we're doing. So thank you so much, and can't wait to do the next one.
Thanks guys, we'd love to hear from you. Cheers.